Hello and welcome to Indus News, live from Islamabad. I'm Naila Shuja and these are the headlines. Voting in the United States presidential election has begun. Earlier, President Donald Trump and his challenger Joe Biden spent the final hours wooing voters in critical states. Over 98 million people have already cast their ballots in early voting. Four people have been killed and 15 wounded after gunmen attacked 6 locations in Austria's central Vienna city. Interior Minister Karl Nehammer said an assailant has been killed while at least one attacker is still at large. Police have launched a major anti-terror operation urging people to stay indoors. Azerbaijan says its troops have forced Armenian army to retreat from the frontline areas in the Khövüjend, Ziljiang, and Gulbaldi regions. The Azeri Defense Ministry says its forces acted in retaliation to a fresh round of attacks by Armenia on the 3 regions. This comes after Russian President Vladimir Putin discussed the conflict in phone calls with the leaders of both countries. A 4-year-old girl has been pulled out of the rubble alive 91 hours after a powerful earthquake hit Turkey's Afghan region. Alia Gizgin is one of the 107th survivors to be rescued in the Afghan Izmir province. Authorities said that the death toll from last week's earthquake has risen to 102. France has reported record-high daily COVID-19 cases as over 52,000 people tested positive, with 470 deaths overnight. India's death toll has surged to 123,000, with 490 new deaths and over 38,000 infections overnight. In Pakistan, 14 people have lost their lives to the virus overnight, taking the fatality count to 6,849. Globally, the coronavirus has claimed over 1.2 million lives and infected over 46.8 million people so far. For news in detail, stay tuned. We'll be right back after a short break. Welcome back. Voting in the United States presidential election has begun. Earlier, President Donald Trump and his challenger Joe Biden spent the final hours wooing voters in critical states. Over 98 million people have already cast their ballots in early voting. More in this report.
With the keys to the Oval Office at stake, U.S. President Donald Trump and Democratic nominee Joe Biden made last-ditch pitches to voters. Trump kicked off his campaign's last journey in Fayetteville, North Carolina, followed by Avoca, Pennsylvania. Addressing supporters, Trump said if he wins over Michigan, he wins the whole thing.
Nobody else could do 6 of these. You think it's easy up here? It's not easy. It's freezing up here, too. If we win Michigan, it's over. It's over. We win the whole thing.
Meanwhile, Joe Biden made a final push for votes in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. Addressing a drive-in rally, the Democratic candidate termed Election Day as a new beginning for the country. He said the U.S. can put an end to the presidency that fanned the flames of hate and failed to protect this nation.
Tomorrow's the beginning of a new day. Tomorrow, we can put an end to a presidency that has left hard-working Americans out in the cold. Tomorrow, we can put an end to a presidency that has divided this nation.
Meanwhile, a Texas judge has denied an attempt by Republicans to throw out about 127,000 votes already cast at drive-through sites in Houston, while the U.S. Justice Department has released previously redacted sections of the Mueller report. The documents say communication between WikiLeaks and officers of Russia's main spy agency took place via encrypted chats.
In Austria, at least 4 people have been killed and 15 others wounded after multiple gun attacks in the capital city of Vienna. Austrian media says 7 of those injured are in critical condition. Austrian Chancellor Sebastian Kurz has called the shooting a repulsive terror attack. Interior Minister Karl Nehammer says an assailant has been killed, while at least 1 other is still at large. Karl Nehammer says the assaults were carried out by at least 1 ISIS sympathizer. Kurz said that the army would protect its sites and the capital so police could focus on anti-terror operations. Meanwhile, Pakistan has condemned the heinous terrorist attack. Azerbaijan says its troops have forced Armenian army to retreat from the frontline areas in the Khojavend, Zilzhan, and Gulbaldi regions. The Azeri Defense Ministry says its forces acted in retaliation to fresh round of attacks by Armenia on the 3 regions. It said many Armenian soldiers were killed while a large number of weapons were destroyed. This comes after Russian President Vladimir Putin discussed the conflict in phone calls with both the leaders of the countries. Meanwhile, UN Human Rights Commission Chief Michelle Bachelet has urged Azerbaijan and Armenia to halt attacks on civilians. Over 1,100 people have been killed since the clashes over Nagorno-Karabakh region erupted on September 27th. The United States has urged the Afghan government and the Taliban to unite for peace and accelerate a political settlement. In a tweet, envoy Zalmay Khalilzad said both sides should deny ISIS the space to carry out inhumane acts like the attack on Kabul University. Khalilzad called on Kabul and the Taliban to unite against a common enemy instead of scoring points against each other. He said ISIS wants to breed chaos and instability, terror and poverty in Afghanistan. The U.S. envoy condemned the attack and offered heartfelt condolences to the families of the victims. Pakistan has expressed concerns on the rise of Islamophobia, racism, and hate speech in Europe. Foreign Minister Shah Mahmood Qureshi said this in a phone call with his German counterpart, Heiko Maas. He said the publication of blasphemous caricatures has hurt the sentiments of Muslims worldwide. Qureshi said that proponents of freedom of expression had minorities vulnerable in Europe. Discussing Afghanistan, Qureshi underlined Pakistan's positive contribution to the ongoing peace process in Doha. He also stressed the need to guard against the role of spoilers who did not wish to see the return of peace and stability. Turkish armed forces have dismantled their largest base in Syria's central province of Hama. Syrian state media said the forces took out all of their equipment from the observation point in Morak town. A watchdog says Turkish forces are currently evacuating another base in Hamas, Shasabu Mountain. Turkey has several bases in Hama, Idlib provinces as a part of PACTS with Russia to observe a ceasefire between the Syrian forces and the rebels. The recent withdrawals are also a part of an agreement between Russia and Turkey. The United Nations says military leaders from Libya's warring sides have arrived in the town of Ghadmis for face-to-face talks. The 5th round of talks has come less than 2 weeks after the side inked a permanent ceasefire in Geneva on the 23rd of October. The United Nations mission in Libya says the meetings will discuss implementing and monitoring the ceasefire. It said the 2 sides will also chalk out a strategy for verifying possible violations. The October deal included the return of armed groups and the expulsion of foreign mercenaries within 3 months. The latest negotiations have come ahead of Libyan political talks scheduled for the 9th of this month, aimed at discussing possible elections. Israel says more Arab states are set to sign the normalization deals with Tel Aviv. In an interview, Israeli Intelligence Minister Eli Cohen said Saudi Arabia, Oman, Qatar, Morocco, and Niger on Israel's agenda. Cohen said these states will establish relations with Israel under a regional reapproachment launched by the United States President Donald Trump. He said if the Trump policy continues after today's U.S. presidential elections, Israel will be able to reach more than 5 agreements. But Cohen said implementing further normalization deals will depend on the next U.S. president displaying continued resolve against Iran.
will be a president who does not show resolve vis-a-vis Iran, then what will happen is that they will take their time, will not rush, will not choose a side, and therefore, like I said, if the policy of the next US president will be a continuation of the current policy, it will be able to lead to more peace agreements. A concessionary policy will get the peace deal stuck.
Israel has recently established diplomatic ties with the UAE, Bahrain, and Sudan under Trump's Deal of the Century initiative. France says its forces have killed more than 50 militants aligned to the Al-Qaeda in airstrikes in central Mali. French Defense Minister Florence Parly says the offensive took place on Friday near the borders of Burkina Faso and Niger. At a news conference, Parly said the operation has dealt a significant blow to terrorist organization Al-Qaeda. She said the offensive was launched after a drone detected a large motorcycle caravan in the border region of Burkina Faso and Niger. French military spokesperson Colonel Frederick Barbie said 4 terrorists along with ammunition, suicide vests have been captured. France has deployed more than 5,000 troops in the Sahel region to combat insurgents. French Interior Minister Gerald Darmanin will visit Tunisia and Algeria later this week to discuss security matters with his counterparts. Concerns over security and immigration have increased in France after a fatal knife attack at a church in Nice last week. France's chief anti-terrorism prosecutor has said the man suspected of carrying out the attack in Nice was Tunisian. France is on the edge amid a wave of attacks after the republication of blasphemous cartoons. A suspect was initially detained but was released on Sunday after investigators found no evidence he was connected to the shooting. Prosecutors have not yet referred to the case to anti-terror colleagues. In Ethiopia, gunmen have killed 32 people and torched more than 20 houses in a raid in the Omoria region. The regional official says the killings were carried out by an armed group called OLF Sane in Omaria's western Wolaga zone. The regional administrator said more than 700 people were also displaced from the area. Earlier, the OLF Sane group split from the Omaro Liberation Front. The latter spent years in exile but was allowed to return to Ethiopia after Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed took office in 2018. The Ethiopian Human Rights Commission said the attack targeted people from the ethnic Amharic group. Ivory Coast President Alassane Ouattara has won a third term in office with 94.27% of the vote. The October 31st election was marred by violence and boycotted by opposition voters. The Election Commission said the final voter turnout was 53.90%, but the opposition claimed that only 10% of the Ivorians took part. It has rejected the outcome, saying Ouattara used illegal ways to hold on to power for the third time. The opposition candidates also announced the creation of a transitional council. The results must be validated by the country's constitutional council. Clashes surrounding the vote have claimed at least 35 lives in the Western African country. The European Union has prepared a second list of sanctions against 15 Belarus officials, including President Alexander Lukashenko. EU ambassadors said these curbs on Lukashenko have been proposed over his refusal to consider new elections. They said fresh elections held in transparent manner are the only way out for the Belarusian crisis. They said EU ambassadors will be given a second sanctions list at a meeting on Wednesday. The list of sanctions will be enforced only if no member state objects to it. The sanctions aim to support mass anti-government protests in Minsk, where thousands have been arrested already. The International Criminal Court has gained support from 73 nations after the U.S. sanctioned the court's top officials. All founding countries of the UN body vowed to preserve its integrity and independence. In a joint declaration, the 73 countries said measures of threats against the court and its officials with it will not be tolerated. Washington imposed sanctions on Chief ICC Prosecutor Fatou Bensouda and official Paxi Mochochoco in September. The two officials were investigating alleged war crimes of U.S. troops in Afghanistan. Director of the International Justice Program at Human Rights Watch, Richard Diker, said the joint statement marks a stark rebuttal of Washington's unprecedented use of sanctions, seeking to undermine the work of the ICC. The joint declaration said sanctions are a tool to be used against those responsible for serious crimes. The United Kingdom, France, Australia, and Canada are among the nations that challenge the U.S. sanctions. And now it's time for a short break. Stay tuned with us. Welcome back. France has reported record daily COVID-19 cases as more than 52,000 people tested positive overnight. Globally, the virus has claimed 1.2 million lives and infected more than 46.8 million people. More in this report.
COVID-19 cases are spiraling out of control across the world, prompting anger and frustration over the reimposition of restrictions. Cases in some countries in Europe and North America continue to spike. But the World Health Organization says it is not too late for the world to come together to fight the virus.
I think one of the challenges that we're seeing across North America and across Europe is that the increases in cases, the increases in hospitalization, the increases in ICU are happening at the same time. In the spring, there was some staggering of this increase, but it's happening in many countries at the same time, where many systems are becoming overwhelmed at the same time.
Meanwhile, healthcare systems across Europe are on the verge of overcapacity. Experts believe Germany's hospitals can reach a breaking point in December, while this level in France and Switzerland might crack by mid-November. With the world's highest number of COVID-19 cases per capita, Belgium can hit its limit by the end of this week.
The Belgian Ministry of Defense has agreed to organize within our institution a COVID-19 unit which will have a capacity of 26 beds and which will take care of the patients who have been transferred to us by all the hospitals in Liège province.
Over in Asia, India has recorded 490 new deaths, with the tally crossing 122,000 and over 8.2 million infections, while the Indian healthcare workers on the front line of the pandemic are protesting once again. Japan's largest airport has opened a COVID-19 testing facility to reopen international travel halted by the pandemic. Meanwhile, the Chinese mainland reported 49 new infections overnight.
In Pakistan, 14 people have died while over 1,100 people tested positive for COVID-19 in the past 24 hours. The country's death toll has risen to 6,849 with over 336,000 cases. The health ministry said there are nearly 14,000 active COVID-19 cases in the country. It said out of over 335,000 countrywide cases, more than 315,000 have recovered so far. The ministry said over 146,000 cases have been detected in the Sindh province. Meanwhile, the Punjab has reported over 104,000 cases. In the capital, Islamabad, more than 20,000 have tested positive for the disease so far. In Turkey, a 4-year-old girl has been pulled out of the rubble alive 91 hours after powerful earthquake struck. Alia Gilzin is one of 107th survivor to be rescued in the Afghan Izmir province. Authorities say the death toll from last week's 6.6 magnitude earthquake has risen to 105. The Disaster and Emergency Management Authority says 144 victims are still under treatment, while 883 have been discharged from hospitals. More than 1,400 aftershocks, 44 of them with a magnitude higher than 4, have been recorded. Earlier, Greek authorities said 2 teenagers also died on the Greek island of Samos. In the Netherlands, an evacuated tram off the track in Rotterdam and nearly plunged 10 meters down of the end of a pier, but it was saved by a statue of a whale's tail. No one was injured in the attack. The conductor emerged shocked but unharmed. There were no passengers on the tram. Coincidentally, the statue is called Saved by the Whale's Tail. Several social media users called to leave the tram as a permanent addition to the artwork. Rotterdam Metro and local officials said it would not be safe to use the tram platform in its current state. Hurricane Eta has intensified to a Category 4 and is expected to bring life-threatening winds to Nicaragua and Honduras. The storm is expected to make landfall in Nicaragua today. The United States National Hurricane Center has warned that Eta may become a Category 5 hurricane before it makes landfall. It said central parts of Central America can receive up to 18 feet of rain, which may cause flooding and landslides. State officials said about 3,000 families on Nicaragua's Atlantic coast have been evacuated. Eta is the 28th named tropical storm of the 2020 Atlantic hurricane season, trying is an all-time record set in 2005. Sri Lankan fishermen have tried to save about 100 whales stranded on their beach. They defied a COVID-19 curfew to save them on the island's southwest coast. Fishermen waded into breaking surf to push the small whales back to sea at the Pandora beach. Later, officials from the Coast Guard and Navy also arrived to help the fishermen in a rescue operation. The phenomenon of whales getting stranded on shallow water remains largely a mystery to scientists. In September, several hundreds of whales died in shallow off the coast of Australia. It was the biggest standing on record and one of the largest in the world. Chinese organ recipients have fulfilled their musical dream of their young Australian donor by forming a band. More about the donor and this band in this report.
Born in 1991, Philip Hancock loved giant pandas, Chinese food and culture, and worked as an English teacher at Southwest University in China's Chongqing. He unexpectedly fell ill and died of diabetes-related complications in May 2018. Hancock's parents donated his liver, kidneys, and corneas in China to honor his final wish. His organs were used in 3 life-saving operations and helped 2 people see again. The 5 organ recipients come from diverse backgrounds: 2 doctors, a driver, a farmer, and a housewife. None of them have a musical background. Nevertheless, in order to fulfill their late donor's biggest dream, forming a band, they decided to try.
One person donated his organs and saved 5 people, and so we named the band A Band of One Man. In order to help Philip realize his dream, we wanted to show our respect for the great love and kindness of the donor.
The band held a special concert in southwest China's Chongqing municipality to pay tribute to Philip's life and memory. And Philip also paid a surprise visit with his beloved guitar in the form of an augmented reality virtual image.
It's good not to forget, but what I'd like you to do from now on is to stay very safe and look after your body very well, and more importantly, get on with your normal lives.
According to the Red Cross Society of China, the young Australian became the first foreign donor in Chongqing and only the 7th in the country's history.
Saudi Arabia's state oil company Aramco's profits have declined by 44.6% in the third quarter. Analysts say that the profits have been dented by lower crude oil prices and volumes sold as the coronavirus crisis choked the demand. In a statement, the company said net income for the third quarter of 2020 was $11.79 billion. But Aramco's chief executive, Amin Nasir, said that the third quarter saw early signs of a recovery due to improved economic activity. He said the company continued to adopt a disciplined and flexible approach to capital allocation in the face of market volatility. Saudi Kingdom, being the world's biggest crude oil exporter, has been hit hard by low prices and sharp cuts in production. European stocks have gained, catching on the Asian market's trend on the U.S. presidential election day. The Pan-European stock 600 gained over 1%, with basic resources jumping 2.5%. London's FTSE 100 has climbed over 1%. Italy's FTSE MBI and the CAC 40 in Paris have added nearly 1.5%, while Frankfurt's DAX has gained over 1.5%. Earlier, all Asian stocks gained more than 1%. And now it's time to take a look at the weather around the world. For the latest news updates, you can follow us on our social media at Indus.News.